Show number 2 is live, baby. We live, baby. We're talking about 4 or 5 president of basketball operation candidates for the Pistons. James Edwards III of The Athletic released an article yesterday going through 3 different offseason plans, so we'll review those. And I mean, golly, man, can somebody get Reese Olson some help?
There's the snap. Blitz comes. Mayfield back. Loads. Throws. Picked up by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Reggie Miller. And it's blocked again. What a block.
Lead pass in for Larkin. In space for Raymond. And he scores! Lucas Raymond!
Welcome to Detroit Sports Talk. I am your host, Bobby Buckets, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. Be sure to like today's show, subscribe to the channel, comment your thoughts on today's topics, and reach out to me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. Now, this is episode number 2. Episode number 1, I think at the time of the recording, we've reached 19 views, and we're up to 7 subscribers. So we are cooking. We are cooking, baby. So a big thank you to all of you who have tuned into the show. I mean, can we reach 10 subscribers by the end of the week? I mean, shoot, at this rate, I mean, I might be submitting my 2 weeks in my full-time job. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Hopefully my boss doesn't see this. All right. Oh, man, we had a break in playoff basketball yesterday. Wasn't a whole lot on. The Tigers were on. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but no playoff basketball games. But Eastern Conference Finals between the Celtics and the Pacers. That starts tonight in Boston, and then Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals is going to start tomorrow night with the Mavericks traveling to Minnesota to take on the T-Wolves. Now, if I was a gambling man, which I 100% am, I would put my money on the teams that did not play in a Game 7. So the Celtics, they beat the Cavs in 5 games, and they last played on May 15th. So it's been 6 days since the Celtics have played in a game. The Pacers played in their Game 7 on Sunday. So it's been 2 days for the Pacers. Just played in 7 games as opposed to 5 that the Celtics played in, and are going on less rest. So give me Celtics -10. And then same thing in regards to the Mavericks and the T-Wolves for tomorrow night. T-Wolves coming off a Game 7 win on Sunday, the 19th. So again, when they play tomorrow, they'll be on what? They'll have an extra day of rest compared to the Pacers, but even still, Dallas only played in 6 games. They have an extra day of rest on top of the extra day that the T-Wolves have because they ended their series on Saturday. T-Wolves won Game 7 on Sunday. So I'm personally taking Boston at -10 tonight on a ton of rest, playing a Game 7 Pacers after coming off of that Game 7, and then I'm taking the Mavericks +4.5 for tomorrow night against the T-Wolves, also coming off of a Game 7. Give me the teams on rest. Also, though, if you want to get real weird, I'm putting both of those, Boston -10 and Mavericks +4.5, in a teaser, a 5.5-point teaser. So I'm going to get Boston at -5, and I'm going to get the Mavs at +9.5. I saw that was -110 on FanDuel. So I'm putting $22 on that. Boston -5, Mavs +9.5. We're just moving the points a little bit in our favor and still coming out at a pretty good number, pretty good odds at -110. So my first gambling advice, there you go. We'll see how that does. But let's go ahead and get into the first topic, 2 of them, which will be about the Detroit Pistons. The first topic about the Pistons today, there are 5 rumored candidates for the POBO/hobo position that the Pistons have. A article came out this weekend. Vince Goodwill and Jake Fisher at Yahoo Sports, they wrote an article, came out on Saturday, just sharing some details about the front runners. And so we have 4 or 5, depending on how you want to look at it. So first off, just give you a little background info. The Pistons have not had a president of basketball operations since Stan Van Gundy. So at this point, Stan Van Gundy was fired in 2018. So it's been 6 years since the Pistons have had a POBO. We had those weird years in between Stan and Troy, where Ed Stefanski was brought on as like a senior advisor. He made himself the GM and cleaned up the books for like a year or two until Troy Weaver eventually was hired in 2020 as the GM. So a little background info that this has been a long time coming. Get somebody in charge who is the top honcho, makes all the decisions, and there's one voice. Right now, there's been plenty of complaints that there's maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, especially from the agent side of things with the Tellem family. So get yourself a POBO, have him be the top dog, have him make the set the vision, be the one decision maker, and stick to it. So ever since April 15th of this year, that is the day after the Pistons finished their NBA season at 14-68. So a franchise worst, 14-68. After that day, that's when they announced that they were going to hire a head of basketball operations or a president of basketball operations, a POBO, a hobo, whatever you want to call it. Now, most teams do have a POBO and a GM, but for some reason, we just haven't had a POBO since Stan. One example is when we had Stan was our POBO. So he was our coach and he was the ultimate decider of all our basketball operations. However, one of the first things that Stan did as POBO was bring in Jeff Bauer as GM. You know, it's essentially your right-hand man, the hand of the king, whatever you want to call it. And Troy is on his own as GM with no POBO, but I mean, it's not like Troy has been great as just the GM, right? We haven't had a POBO since Stan. Troy hasn't been great. That's why you're bringing in a new voice to kind of set the tone for the rest of his tenure. Who knows how long a POBO will be here for? But just to review how the last 4 seasons have gone with Weaver in charge. So Weaver hired in 2020. His very first draft is when, I was so excited about it because he went so hard in the draft where it was like, well, you couldn't turn away because he kept trading up for more and more picks. So he took Killian at 7 overall, traded up to get Sadiq at like 16, maybe 16, and then traded up to get Stu at like 19. Well, very first season under Troy Weaver, that ended in 20 wins. Next year, win the lottery. Cade Cunningham comes in. We go from 20 wins to 23 wins. Cade's rookie year, Troy's second season. Coming back to 2023, the year that we drafted JEIII and Jalen Duren, Cade played he only played 12 games, I want to say, before he had that shin surgery. That's something that had been lingering since high school. So no Cade that year. Handed the keys to Ivy, let him do his thing, had a great rookie year. But after going from 23 wins the season prior, 17 wins after drafting Ivy and Duren, and then this most recent year, 2024, the 4th year with Weaver in charge, we're going even further down. Franchise worst, 14 wins after drafting Asar Thompson 5th overall and then trading back up the end of the first round to draft Marcus Sasser. So that's why you're getting a new POBO. We just don't have the right people making the right decisions. Troy had an opportunity with cap space this past summer to improve the team, and then a Joe Harris, Monte Morris didn't get it done. Didn't get it done at all. When, could you have gone a Houston Rockets route and gone and got 2 vets, spent good money of 2 guys that you can play? Well, probably pushing it back another summer where your new POBO is going to be the one doing that this summer. So there are 2 things that I'm looking for that I want the new guy to do right away. The first one, you have to fire Troy and you have to fire Monty. After a franchise record worst season, the franchise worst 14 wins, you have to completely remove the culture and the people stuck to that season of suck. That's what that is. It was a season of suck. And you have to remove the culture from that season and start fresh. So get hired, bring in your own guys, bring in your own GM, and bring in your own coach. Get rid of the two that contributed to the very worst season in franchise history. And as soon as you do that, you extend Cade on a rookie max deal. So I think we can extend Cade. I know that we can do it for 5 years, and I think it's roughly $205 million. That is the max that we can pay Cade in a rookie max extension. So come out, first move, show everybody that you mean business, get rid of the people who contributed to our 14-win season, and then show to the NBA and to the Pistons fan base that you're building around Cade. Cade is the guy. Extend him right away. Tell the entire world, this is our dude. This is who we're building around. So those are the first two moves I would love to see the new guy make. But let's go into the candidates specifically that were listed as the front runners in this Yahoo Sports article. And I'm going to do it from who I want the least to who I want the most. So I'm going to go from 5 to 1 in my order. And number 5 is Scott Perry. So Scott Perry was hired by the Knicks in 2017 as general manager and was fired last year. But he was the one to bring Jalen Brunson to New York. Now, if you hire his dad as assistant coach, that is also going to be a reason why Jalen Brunson went to New York. So I don't know if you can put it all on Scott. But some of the first round picks underneath Scott when he was at New York was Frank I can't say his last name, Ntilikina. I know I messed that up, but Frank, I know he's from France, PG, didn't last. Kevin Knox. We know all about Kevin Knox as a Detroit Piston. RJ Barrett and Obi Toppin. So out of all 4 of those guys, none of them are still on the team. RJ Barrett was flipped for OG Anunoby. So RJ Barrett, great draft pick. Exactly, I think he went 3rd. And he's now in Toronto, considering he's from Canada. Fits well there. He's been playing well. So RJ Barrett was a good pickup. I liked Obi Toppin as well, but they flipped him last year to the Pacers. So no longer on the team. Kevin Knox may no longer in the NBA, and I don't think Frank is either. So the main reason, though, I think Scott is included in this top 5 is because he's a Detroit native, and he was a Pistons executive during the going to work days. So those 2004, 2010, whatever it was, when we went to like 6 Eastern Conference finals in a row. So he has a Detroit connection. He's from Detroit. But again, I mean, if we're going back to try to recreate our success and we're going back 20 years to find a guy, I just don't think that's the best way to go about it. He's in his 60s. I don't think his timeline matches up with our timeline. So Scott Perry is at the bottom of my list for who I would want as the next leader for the Pistons front office. The next one is John Hammond. If you are a longtime Detroit Pistons fan, John Hammond, also during the going to work days, he was an executive. So he has a connection to Detroit already from already working with the Pistons. And he's currently right now a senior advisor to the Orlando Magic GM, Jeff Weltman. So again, I don't want to go back 20 years and try to recreate something that worked 20 years ago, because I don't necessarily think it's going to work now. And most of all, I saw a clip on Twitter. It's from Keith Black Trudeau posting a clip. It was the last Game 7, I think, that the Pistons played in. And they ended up, I don't know, they let the other team, I forget who it was, I think it was the Spurs, but scored 61 points in that game or something like that. And there were a couple, I tweeted about it. Go check out the tweet that I put about this. But the spacing in that clip was horrendous. The first 2 clips, somebody charged right at a post-up player and missed a layup because she'd swatted it. And then in the second clip, there were 4 guys inside the arc, and some guy was shooting a 20-footer mid-range jumper that got blocked. So just looking at how the game was played 20 years ago, it's so much different that I'd rather have somebody who's got fresh new ideas, puts an emphasis on three-point shooting with how important that has become. I know that there was a stat. I was listening to the JEIII podcast a couple weeks ago, and this was during round 2, early days round 2, but at some point the team who had just shot more threes was winning majority of the games. They were like 25-7 at that time if you were just shooting more threes than the other team. So Pistons have struggled to shoot threes, to make threes, to do anything with threes. So I'd rather just give me a guy with some fresh ideas. We're not relying on the success from 20 years ago to somehow rekindle that magic and make it work now. So John Hammond, pass. He's turning 70 soon. Hope this doesn't come off like I'm being a little ageist, but candidate number 3, Dennis Lindsey. So Dennis is younger than both of the other guys. He's currently an advisor for the Mavericks. He was the GM of the Utah Jazz, though, from 2012 to 2021. But then Ryan Smith, the Qualtrics owner, swooped in and bought the Jazz. And at that same time, when the Jazz were purchased, Dennis was like, hey, I'm going to step down. New ownership, just they want to bring somebody else in charge. And that's when Ryan Smith went and got Danny Ainge. So Danny Ainge is now the head honcho over in Utah. Dennis Lindsey leaving his GM job a couple years ago and currently advising for the Dallas Mavericks. I went and took a look at Dennis's draft selections. I couldn't find much on Basketball Reference, but some of his highlights were drafting Grayson Allen in 2018, Trey Lyles in 2015, Dante Exum and Rodney Hood in 2014. So a couple of Jazz guys that, I remember from 10 years ago. But ultimately just not a great resume in terms of what I could find on his draft picks. Now, moving into the top 2, this is where things are getting spicy. So this is who I think will end up getting the job, and that's Trajan Langdon. He's currently the GM of the New Orleans Pelicans. He's the only one on this list who's under 50, and he's the only one who's a former player. So I found out that he played high school ball in Alaska, and his nickname was the Alaskan Assassin. Absolutely love that for Langdon's nickname. But essentially, the cool part about Langdon is he's only continued to work his way up the NBA ladder. So he was drafted in 1999, and he played for 3 years in the NBA on the Cavs. So he's an ex-player. Anything about the Detroit Lions, if you want to steal things from them, full of ex-players, going super well because they can relate to the guys on the team. It's just easier for them to get along and to understand what it's like to be in each other's shoes. So after he played, I want to say he ended in the early 2000s. About 10 years later, he became a scout for the Spurs in 2012. He was hired then in 2016 to be the assistant GM of the Brooklyn Nets, and then hired in 2019 to be the GM of the Pelicans. So player into a scout, into an assistant GM, into a GM, now interviewing for a POBO position. I think that's exactly the kind of resume you want to look at. And just like the guy has put in the work to get to where he's at. And he's worked his way up that NBA ladder. And that's just what you want to see. He's working hard. He's never been fired, and he's only been promoted. It's just all good things around Langdon. One wrinkle that I want to throw in there, when he was a player, Arn Tellem was his agent. So we talk about all the time how Tellem clients tend to find their way to Detroit. Now, this is a past Tellem client 20 years ago, but anytime the Tellems are involved with Detroit, I think you have to bring up that connection. Whether it's good or bad, maybe it's good in this scenario. If we are going to steal Langdon from New Orleans. Hello, dog. The last thing I'll say about Langdon, as I've been looking at the history of all of these guys, it's Langdon that I'm most excited about, because if you look at their roster, their wing room is just loaded. They are loaded with 3 and D wings. Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy III, Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels. I mean, they have such a loaded wing room that because the Pistons' weakness is 3-and-D wings, that's why I want Langdon the most. He's the best, or he's very good at locating and realizing who's going to be a quality 3-and-D wing and then going and get them. And he's doing it in different ways. Najee Marshall went undrafted in 2020. They signed him to a two-way deal and then signed him to the team afterwards. So that's not even a guy you're finding in the draft. That's finding an undrafted player and making him work. And now I think you could even sign Najee Marshall to be a Piston. Some people want him as a cheap 3-and-D wing. Maybe give him the biannual exception around $8 million for the next 2 to 3 years. I think that would be a great deal. Some of his better wings. He drafted Trey Murphy III in 2021 in the first round, and then drafted Herb Jones in the second round of the same draft. To walk out with Trey Murphy III and Herb Jones, who have both improved their shooting from three and are great defenders, that's just a great haul for him in the 2021 draft. He got Dyson Daniels in 2022, point guard, wing, still figuring out where he's at, but he's a defender. He's a wing defender, and he's good at it. So Langdon is going to be my choice, solely just based on what he's done, his resume, the way he's worked himself up, and he finds the kind of players that the Pistons need the most. Lastly, number one, shouldn't be a surprise, Tim Connolly. Now, Tim Connolly is currently employed. He is employed by the Minnesota Timberwolves. He does have an opt-out contract, so you are not going to be able to interview Tim Connolly until the Timberwolves season is over. When the Timberwolves season is over, you need Tim Connolly to opt out of his contract, and then you can interview him. So there's work to be done before you can even sit down with Connolly. Now, I'm sure there's a way that Gores can be whispers to Connolly about being interested. He obviously knows we're interested with the reports that have come out that are public. But the thing that I find fascinating about Connolly is that he built a championship Nuggets roster, got then poached by the T-Wolves, got paid more money to come build the roster for the T-Wolves, makes that Rudy Gobert trade that was highly scrutinized. I hated it at the beginning because I didn't think Rudy was that guy. But now you see what the T-Wolves are going through in these playoffs, what Ant-Man is doing, how the Ant, Cat, Gobert, the whole team's just defensive mindset. They just get after it. They're a bunch of dogs. He built a Timberwolves roster to beat the championship Nuggets roster that he also built. The guy is just like the top dog when it comes to executives of roster management around the league. So is it likely? I'm going to say no. I remember James Edwards III had a report, and this was like a month ago, that he thinks by the end of late May that they're going to have a candidate. We're getting to the end of late May. Here's where I would put my money on. If somebody is not hired, I'll reword that. If Langdon is not hired by the end of May and they're going to continue to delay this thing into June, especially when the draft is in June, they're going after Connolly and they know they can get him. The only reason that you're going to sit around and wait for Connolly to appear after all this time, or basically for Connolly to be available after all this time, is because you've gotten whispers to him that you're interested. You're going to hand him a blank check and he's coming to Detroit. So that's my prediction. If Langdon is not hired by the end of May, I'm going to put all my money in the Connolly basket. You're only waiting for Connolly if you know you can get him because you're so close to the draft and so close to free agency. You need to get somebody. You need to get somebody who can start getting their fingerprints on the franchise. So long segment, a lot of action going on. But who do you want the Pistons to hire? Let me know in the comments down below or over on Twitter. To get to the second topic, we're still going to stick with the Pistons. And James Edwards III came out with a article yesterday, and it was 3 different scenarios in which if he were the GM, if he were the POBO, just 3 different scenarios that could happen this offseason. So let's take a look at those. And what I want to do is kind of break them down one by one. So highly suggest getting an athletic subscription if you don't have it already. But what I want to take a look at is just to go straight into the trades that James has offered here. So his first scenario is to swing for the fences. Am I necessarily a fan of swinging for the fences? I don't think so. I don't think the Pistons are at that point where they're ready to do that. But I mean, in this scenario, you're trading 2 of your 4 core guys in Ivy and Duren, who are only been in the NBA for 2 years. And on top of that, you're sending a first-round pick back. I just don't know if it's worth it for the return that you're getting. So, 1, I would welcome Jeremy Grant back at the right price. I mean, ever since joining Portland, he shot 40% from 3 the last 2 years on more than 5 attempts per game. And that's exactly the kind of player that these Pistons need. You need somebody, a 3-and-D player, small forward, power forward, who can come in and hit their outside shots. And not only hit them, but hit them on volume. We want people taking 5, 6, 7 threes per game, and Jeremy's doing it. The only issue is he's owed $132 million over the next 4 years and has a player option on that last year. He's going to accept it. He's going to be making $36 million. Some people already think he's overpaid. He's going to be accepting that, and he's going to be like 34 or something like that when he gets around to that deal, 33, 34. So plan on having Jeremy for the next 4 years at $132 million if you're trading for him. On top of that, bringing in Brandon Ingram, I don't know if I necessarily love the fit with Cade, because Cade is kind of a mid-range guru, and Brandon Ingram, kind of likes that ISO game, trying to get off mid-range shots, kind of like Cade does. So I would rather Cade be your main ball handler, and he's kicking it to people who don't hold on to the ball. I worry that if you're kicking to Brandon Ingram and there's not a shot there right away, he's breaking down his guy, just going ISO, trying to get a shot up. Most of all, though, Ingram only has 1 more deal left on his contract, and he's expecting a max extension. That extension over 4 years is looking at $208 million. So that's more than $50 million per year Brandon Ingram is expecting after his last year of his deal is up. So if you're trading for Brandon Ingram, it's because you want him on the team long-term and expect to extend him. I'm not giving him a max contract. I'm not giving him $50 million per year. So in this deal, that's what James says needs to happen. Ain't going to happen from me. Lastly, bringing in Jonas Valanciunas. I like the premise of what James is trying to do here by getting a stretch big. He does shoot threes. He shot them in the mid to low 30s the past few years. My issue is, though, his volume is on 1 or 2 threes per game. Nobody is guarding Jonas. Let me reword that. Nobody is worried about Jonas Valanciunas from 3 because he shoots it low to mid 30s and shoots it on such low volume that he's just not a constant threat. The other worry is he's not a great rim protector. I know that Duren hasn't been a great rim protector, and if you are going to upgrade the center position, it seems like it's been an Isaiah Hartenstein, a Nick Claxton, even a Goga Batazzi kind of situation of getting a true rim protector, and all 3 of those guys are that. Jonas is not. Valanciunas is not a rim protector. So I think my biggest complaint in regards to Valanciunas being included is if you're looking for a stretch big who can also defend, you have him on the team already. It's beef stew. I mean, Isaiah Stewart shot 38% from 3 on more than 4 attempts per game, and you've already got him signed for the exact same amount or pretty close to, I think it was 14, 15 million. you've already got this player on your team. So number one, this first example, I personally would not do it. I don't think it's worth going in all in. I don't think it's worth losing all those assets to get players you have to pay and just players who I think you already have better players on your team. So I don't know. I wouldn't do it. I don't think the Pistons are there to go all in on trades. The second scenario, though, is James said to go all in on free agency. And the best part about this tactic, you're keeping the number 5 pick, you're keeping Ivy, and you're keeping Duren. The issue is you are then giving 23 to 25 million to Malik Monk. I like Malik Monk as who I think JEIII could become. I don't like Malik Monk because he can't defend. So does Malik Monk become who we're hoping JEIII would be? And then the pairing next to Cade works well? Maybe. 25 million for that? That's steep. And if people are going to pay 25 million, or if somebody would pay 25 million for Tobias Harris, people would lose it. People would lose it if you're paying 25 million to Tobias. So it's just, and then again, if you're going to give 16 million to Valanciunas over Isaiah Hartenstein, I don't know. I like that better than going in on just trades, getting and, cashing in on some assets. I just think that you can get maybe better players instead of Malik Monk. There's Buddy Hield, who could be cheaper and is more predominantly a 3-point shooter. KCP, a defender. He's got a 15 million team option with the Nuggets. The Nuggets they're the most expensive team already for next year. They've got to get off some money. Maybe KCP says, all right, I'm done with my ring chasing. I'm trying to get paid now. And maybe a $20 million deal as opposed to 25 for Monk gets it done. He can be your point of attack defender. Cade doesn't have to guard, your point guards. Tobias, can you get Obi Toppin for 15 million as opposed to Tobias for 25? I don't know. I'd rather have Hartenstein over Jonas Valanciunas for the same reasons that we spoke to on the last one. But let's take a look at scenario number 3, which is a blend of both. So the first thing that he's doing is he's trading Ivy to the Spurs for Keldon Johnson in a 2020 first. So that would be a top 10 protected pick from the Bulls. One, Keldon Johnson is a young wing. He can shoot the 3. He's a fine defender, and he has a descending contract. So he's only going to get less expensive over the next 3 years, 19 million next season, and then dropping to 17.5. Very reasonable contract. I would not mind this trade. Even getting a first-round pick for Ivy on top of taking salary back and getting a 25, mid-20s-year-old player, I think is a great deal, specifically for the 2025 class. That draft class is loaded. You're probably going to end up with another lottery pick because the Pistons, what do you get to, 30 wins? You're going to have another lottery pick. If you can get 2 of those, do the Bulls, do they get to the play-in and miss out? Are they an 11 through 14 team and you end up with, say, the 12th pick and the 5th pick again? Can you move both of those and get into the top 3? There's just a lot to work with that 2025 first-round pick. And then he wants to sign Monk and Nick Claxton at about $23 million. Totally fine. You're frequently going to see Malik Monk or Nick Claxton as rumored Pistons. And I would say I'm either between number 3 or number 2 personally, so I'm not totally sure which one I would choose, but I just don't go all in. If you're going to flip assets, it's probably going to be Ivy just because he seems like he's the odd man out. And if you can get a first-round pick back for him on top of getting a wing, a 3-and-D wing, I think you got to do it. So which one out of these 3 scenarios do you guys feel like you are most interested in? Is there a different trade that you have in mind? Let me know below in the comments or over on Twitter. And we're back for the final topic, and we're going to get into some Tigers action. If you missed the game last night, you missed nothing. We discussed previously how Javi and Torque were starting to get their bats going. Torque has been getting some home runs the last couple of week or two. Javi had a very hot weekend. That did not continue yesterday. Torque had another opportunity with the bases loaded that didn't go anywhere. And so I saw this stat on Twitter and just thought it was wild. But Torque is now 2 of 21 in his career with bases loaded. 2 of 21. I think it's tied with Madison Bumgarner, the San Francisco Giants pitcher. So it's not what you want from a guy who's supposed to be one of your strongest hitters. And especially in a moment when you got the bases juice, when you're trying to get some runs. We know that we've had struggles for the last 2 or 3 years on offense, and you need more from Torque in that situation. You can't go 2 of 21 ever when the bases are loaded. I will give a shout out to Colt Keith, though. He's made some noise recently. He went 3 of 4 last night, and he's got a .571 average over the last 4 games. So maybe getting some extra bats from Colt. But really, we got to get our guy Reese Olson some help. So number one, last night Reese was pitching. He was somewhere in the third, I want to say, and took a line drive off the hip. Tried pitching, and I think he probably just had a nice stinger, and they didn't want him to finish the game. So they pulled him during the third inning. I think he went 2.2 innings, and he did let up a 2-run homer before getting hurt. So Reese Olson has now moved to 0-5 in his 9 starts so far this year. He is 0-5 despite having a 2.16 ERA. The only starting pitcher on the team that has a lower ERA than 2.16 is a Cy Young candidate and your 6-0 pitcher, Tariq Skubal. So what somebody swing the bat when Reese is pitching, man. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I tried digging deeper into this. So they each have started and pitched in 9 games, right? Reese has a 2.16 ERA. It's second on the team. It's third if you're going to loop in the closer, Jason Foley. So he's third total on the team, second behind Skubal for starting pitchers, and Skubal is at a 1.80. So 2.16 to 1.80, 2 very, very good ERAs, yet Reese is 0-5, Skubal 6-0. Why? Are people stepping up on the opposite side of the plate when Reese is pitching, hitting left-handed? I mean, somebody's out there just doing him dirty, not getting ready for games when Reese is pitching. I tried to dive in deep to try to let's see what similarities are still between them. What else is different? And so I think the biggest difference is the number of strikeouts. Skubal is at 66. Reese only has 43. Yet Skubal has only let up 35 hits, and Reese has only let up 37. So there's a difference in strikeouts, but Reese has only let up 2 more hits than Skubal. Skubal has let up 13 runs. Reese has let up 16. So Reese, despite only giving up 2 more hits and 3 more runs than Skubal, he's 0-5. Skubal's 6-0. And lastly, I looked at the total number of runs scored in those Skubal wins and those Reese losses. When Skubal has won those 6 games, there has been a total of 41 runs in those games. So essentially 7 runs per game, just under 7 runs per game in Skubal wins. And they have scored 10 total in Olson's 5 losses. So when the Skubal wins, it's 7 runs per game. In the Olson losses, it's 2 runs per game. That includes 2 shutouts in a max score of 4. So there's been a game of 4 runs, 3 runs, 3 runs, 0 runs, 0 runs for Reese Olson. Stop doing Reese dirty. Get this man some offense. Golly. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Detroit Sports Talk. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. Like today's show, subscribe to the channel. Please comment below to share your thoughts on any of today's topics. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. Thanks again for taking the time for talking, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.